I stood in our family dining room watching my Uncle Derek slide my proposal back across the mahogany table. He didn't even look at it, just pushed it away like it was junk mail. My father sat at the head of the table, hands folded, saying nothing. My cousin Tyler leaned back in his chair with that smug grin I'd seen my whole life. The one that said he'd already won. I had spent 3 weeks on that proposal. 3 weeks analyzing our supply chain, identifying cost savings, mapping out a plan that could save the company nearly $200,000 in the first year alone. I presented it calmly, professionally, the way I'd practiced. When I finished, the silence was thick. Then my uncle cleared his throat. "Alyssa, you're valuable to us. You know that. But leadership decisions need to come from people with, well, the right perspective." I felt my chest tighten. "What perspective is that?" My father finally spoke. "What Derek means is we've already decided Tyler will lead the expansion project." Tyler's grin widened. I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something more. Anything more. He didn't. I picked up my folder, stood, and walked out. Nobody followed me. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying either. I just stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My breathing was steady, calm. That surprised me. I expected to feel broken. Instead, I felt something else. Something cold and sharp. I whispered to myself, "Never again." The words came out clear, like a promise. I had spent 10 years working for that company. 10 years proving myself, fixing problems, doing the work nobody else wanted to do. And for what? To be dismissed in front of people who had done a fraction of what I had. I started the car and drove home. On the way, I didn't replay the meeting in my head. I didn't think about what I should have said. Instead, I thought about what I was going to do next. Because something in me had shifted. If they wouldn't value what I built for them, then I would build something they couldn't ignore. Something better. Something mine. I parked outside my apartment, grabbed my bag, and went inside. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. 2 years earlier, I stayed late on a Friday to finish a market analysis report. The company was considering expanding into 3 new regions, and my uncle needed data to present to the board. I worked through the weekend, cross-referencing census data, competitor pricing, and shipping logistics. By Sunday night, I had a 30-page report with charts, projections, and risk assessments. Monday morning, I handed it to Tyler. He was supposed to pass it to my uncle. That Thursday, the board meeting happened. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it later. Tyler presented my report, word for word, chart for chart. He didn't mention my name once. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "It's a team effort, Alyssa. You know how it works." I went to my father. He smiled and patted my shoulder. "You did good work. That's what matters." But it wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that my name wasn't on it. My effort became invisible. I swallowed my frustration and went back to work. That was the first time. But sitting in my car after the dinner meeting, I realized it wasn't the first time at all. It was just the first time I couldn't ignore it anymore. Growing up, I watched my cousin Tyler get praised for everything. When he made the soccer team, my uncle threw him a party. When I made honor roll for the 4th year in a row, my father said, "Good job, sweetheart," and went back to reading the paper. When Tyler got accepted to a state college, the whole family celebrated. When I got a full scholarship to a better school, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and asked if I could help with the dishes. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I wasn't doing it for recognition. But deep down it hurt. I worked harder than Tyler. I studied longer. I cared more. And yet, he was the golden child, the future of the family, the one everyone believed in. I was the reliable one, the one who helped, the one who supported, but never the one who led. After college, I joined the family business. My father said it made sense. "You're good with details, Alyssa. We need someone like you." I thought it meant I was valued. It didn't. It meant I was useful. And I kept helping them, year after year, believing that eventually they'd see me. But they never did. 3 years into working at the company, we faced a crisis. A major client threatened to leave because of delayed shipments and poor communication. My uncle panicked. My father called an emergency meeting. Tyler was supposed to handle the account, but he'd barely kept up with the emails. I stepped in. I contacted the client directly, apologized, and set up a recovery plan. I coordinated with our shipping team, renegotiated delivery schedules, and created a tracking system so the client could see real-time updates. Within 2 weeks, the client was happy. Within a month, they increased their order volume. At the next board meeting, my uncle stood up and thanked Tyler for his leadership. Tyler nodded humbly, like he'd done something. I sat in the back of the room, taking notes. Nobody looked at me. After the meeting, I walked past my father in the hallway. He stopped me. "You did good work on that account, Alyssa." I waited for more. That was it. I nodded and kept walking. I didn't know it then, but I was learning something valuable. I was learning how to run a business better than any of them. I just wasn't getting credit for it. A year before the dinner meeting, we had another board session. This one was about leadership succession. My father was getting older. The company needed a clear plan. I had been working there for 9 years by then. I knew every department, every process, every client relationship. I thought maybe, finally, they'd recognize what I brought. My uncle stood and proposed that Tyler be named Chief Operating Officer. My father agreed immediately. Nobody asked me what I thought. Nobody even looked at me. After the meeting, I caught my father in his office. Why wasn't I considered? He looked up from his desk, surprised. Considered for what? For COO, or any leadership role. He set down his pen and sighed. "Alyssa, you're the glue that holds this place together." But glue isn't leadership. I stood there, frozen. What does that mean? It means we need someone who can make bold decisions. Someone clients and investors will respect. And I can't do that. He didn't answer. He just looked back at his paperwork. I left his office and went to the bathroom. I locked the stall door and sat down. That's when the seed was planted. Not anger. Not revenge. Just clarity. They would never see me as a leader. So I'd have to show them. The day after the dinner meeting, I went to work like nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. I didn't complain. I didn't argue. I just watched. I started paying attention to things I'd taken for granted. The way orders were processed. The way inventory was managed. The way client complaints were handled. I saw inefficiencies everywhere. Systems that hadn't been updated in years. Processes that wasted time and money. I made notes. Not to fix them. Not anymore. To learn from them. Because if I was going to build something of my own, I needed to know what not to do. I watched Tyler stumble through meetings. I watched my uncle make decisions based on gut feeling instead of data. I watched my father nod along, too tired to push back. And I realized something. They weren't smarter than me. They weren't better than me. They just had the title. And titles didn't mean much when the foundation was cracking. I worked quietly for the next 2 months, doing my job, keeping my head down. But in my mind, I was already gone. I was already building something else. I reached out to a former professor from college. His name was Dr. Raymond Collier, and he'd built and sold 3 companies in his career. I asked if I could buy him coffee. He said yes. We met at a small cafe near campus. I told him everything. The proposal. The dismissal. The years of being overlooked. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you want revenge?" I thought about that. "No. I want respect." He smiled. "Good answer. Here's my advice. Don't compete out of anger. Build what they lack." What do they lack? Vision. Adaptability. Respect for their people. He leaned forward. "You know their weaknesses because you've been fixing them for years. Now stop fixing them and start building something better." I left that cafe with a clear head. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. I titled it, Blueprint. By the end of the week, I had a business plan. A real one. Not a proposal for someone else's company. A plan for mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my friends. I just worked. Quietly. Carefully. And with more focus than I'd ever had before. I found a small office space on the east side of town. It was cheap. 1 room, a bathroom, and a window that looked out at a parking lot. I signed a 6-month lease. I bought a used desk, an old office chair, and a laptop. That was it. That was the beginning. I posted a job listing for an intern. I needed someone who understood the industry but wasn't burned out yet. Someone hungry. I got 12 applications. One stood out. His name was Marcus. He'd applied to work at my family's company a year earlier. They rejected him because he didn't have a degree from a top-tier school. I called him. We talked for an hour. He was sharp, eager, and had ideas nobody at my family's company would ever listen to. I hired him. On his first day, Marcus brought me a folder. I've been tracking changes in the industry. There's a shift coming. A big one. I opened the folder. Inside were articles, market analyses, and supplier reports. He was right. A major shift was coming, and my family's company was completely blind to it. I looked at Marcus and smiled. Let's get to work. The shift Marcus identified was in sustainable sourcing. Clients were starting to demand eco-friendly materials and transparent supply chains. It wasn't mainstream yet, but it was growing. My family's company ignored it. They stuck with their old suppliers, their old methods, their old contracts. I didn't. I researched suppliers who specialized in sustainable materials. I reached out to smaller manufacturers who were willing to work with a startup. I built relationships based on respect and transparency. Then I reached out to a mid-sized client I knew was frustrated with my family's company. I didn't badmouth them. I just presented an alternative. A better process, better communication, better values. They signed with me. It was a small contract, but it was real. Marcus and I celebrated with cheap pizza in the office. A week later, that client referred me to 3 more. Within 2 months, we'd signed 5 clients. My revenue was small, but it was growing. And more importantly, I was proving something. Not to them. To myself. I could do this. I could build something real. And I didn't need their permission. 4 months in, my family invited me to a weekend barbecue. I almost didn't go, but I knew staying away would raise questions. So I showed up. Tyler was grilling. My uncle was holding court by the pool. My father was in his chair, half asleep. My mother asked how I was doing. Good. Busy. Still working. Yeah. Actually, I started my own thing. Tyler laughed from across the yard. She's playing entrepreneur now. A few people chuckled. My uncle raised his beer. That's cute, Alyssa. Let us know if you need help. I smiled politely. Thanks. I'm doing fine. I stayed for an hour, then left. On the drive home, I checked my phone. An email notification. A national retailer wanted to set up a meeting. They'd heard about my approach. They wanted to explore working together. I pulled over and read the email twice. Then I called Marcus. We just got a meeting with a national chain. He was silent for a second. Then he shouted, so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. 6 months in, my revenue had tripled. And they had no idea. The industry shift hit faster than anyone expected. A major supplier announced they were phasing out non-sustainable materials. Companies that hadn't prepared were scrambling. My family's company was one of them. I heard about it through a former coworker who still kept in touch. They were in emergency meetings, trying to find new suppliers, trying to renegotiate contracts. My uncle was furious. My father was stressed. Tyler was out of his depth. Meanwhile, I'd been preparing for this for months. I'd already secured relationships with 3 sustainable suppliers. I'd already adjusted my pricing models. I'd already communicated the changes to my clients. When the shift hit, I didn't panic. I adapted. My clients stayed. My competitors lost theirs. One of those competitors was my family. A client I used to manage at their company called me. Alyssa, I don't know if you remember me. I do. I need help. Your family's company can't meet our new standards. Can you? I paused. Then I said, yes. Let me send you a proposal. 2 days later, they signed with me. It was the first client to jump ship. It wouldn't be the last. My father called me on a Tuesday morning. His voice was tight. Alyssa, we need to talk. About what? About you stealing our clients. I took a breath. I'm not stealing anyone, Dad. People go where they're respected. You're going after our accounts. I'm offering better service. That's not the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. This isn't right, Alyssa. We're family. Then maybe you should have treated me like family when I worked for you. He hung up. I set the phone down and stared at it. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. That afternoon, I got an email from a national retailer. They wanted a formal meeting to discuss a partnership. This wasn't small anymore. This was real. I forwarded the email to Marcus. His response was one word. Holy shit! I smiled. Then I started preparing. Because I knew once I landed this deal, there was no going back. My family would see me as a threat. And honestly, I was fine with that. The meeting with the national retailer happened 2 weeks later. I wore a navy suit. Marcus wore his best shirt and tie. We walked into their corporate office in the city, took the elevator to the 12th floor, and sat in a sleek conference room. 3 executives sat across from us. They asked questions. I answered them. They asked about capacity. I showed them projections. They asked about sustainability. I walked them through my supply chain. By the end of the meeting, they were nodding. One of them, a woman named Miss Brennan, leaned forward. We've worked with a lot of companies. Most of them talk a big game. You actually have the foundation. Thank you. We'd like to move forward. Pending legal review, we're prepared to offer you a 12-month contract. I kept my face calm. Inside, I was screaming. That sounds good. We'll be ready. We shook hands. Marcus and I left the building, walked 2 blocks, and then he grabbed my shoulders. Do you understand what just happened? I nodded. Yeah, I do. We went to a diner, ordered burgers and fries, celebrated quietly, because I knew this changed everything. My family would hear about it, and they'd panic. They did. A week after I signed the contract, my cousin Tyler called me. We need to talk. About what? About what you're doing. I'm running a business, Tyler. You're sabotaging us. I almost laughed. I'm not sabotaging anyone. I'm just doing what you all said I couldn't. Alyssa, this is serious. You're taking clients. You're undercutting us. I'm offering better service. That's called competition. He paused. Dad wants to meet. I'm busy. Alyssa, I hung up. 2 days later, my uncle called. Then my mother. Then my father again. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them explanations. Not anymore. Instead, I focused on my company. I hired 2 more people. I expanded my supplier network. I locked in 3 more mid-sized clients. By the end of the month, my revenue had doubled. Again. Meanwhile, I started hearing things. My family's company was losing contracts. They were bleeding money. Their biggest client was considering leaving. I didn't feel bad. I felt something else. I felt free. My father showed up at my office unannounced. Marcus let him in. I was on the phone with a supplier when he walked into my office. I held up a finger, finished the call, then hung up. Dad! Alyssa! He looked around the office. At my desk. At the whiteboard covered in timelines and projections. At Marcus working quietly in the corner. So this is it. This is it. He sat down across from me. You're really doing this. I've been doing it for months. He rubbed his face. We're in trouble, Alyssa. I know. And you don't care? I looked at him. Really looked at him. I spent 10 years caring, Dad. I cared when you ignored my ideas. I cared when you gave Tyler credit for my work. I cared when you told me I wasn't leadership material. And none of it mattered. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. He stood up. This is a mistake. You're going to regret this. I stood up too. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. He left. I sat back down and got back to work. 2 weeks later, my family's company lost their biggest client. The client didn't just leave. They came to me. I met with their team, listened to their frustrations, offered solutions. They signed a 2-year contract. When the news got out, my phone exploded. My uncle left 3 voicemails. Tyler sent a dozen texts. My mother called crying. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I got a call from someone else. A supplier who'd worked with my family for 15 years. Ms. Alyssa, I heard you're expanding. I am. I'd like to discuss working with you instead. I paused. Instead of my family's company? Yes. Why? Because they don't pay on time. They don't communicate. And frankly, they don't respect us. I scheduled a meeting. By the end of the week, I'd signed him. One by one, the pieces of my family's empire were crumbling. And one by one, I was picking them up. A month later, I got a call from a private investor named Mr. Langston. He'd been watching the industry. He'd heard about me. Ms. Alyssa, I'd like to discuss a partnership. We met at his office downtown. He was in his 60s, sharp-eyed calm. I've been tracking your growth. It's impressive. Thank you. I invest in companies with strong leadership and smart strategy. Yours is both. What are you proposing? A partnership. I provide capital and connections. You expand. Together, we position your company to acquire smaller competitors. I lean back. Acquire? Yes. The industry's consolidating. Companies that can't adapt are failing. You could buy them. Restructure them. Strengthen your position. I thought about that. Who are the targets? He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were profiles of 3 companies. The third one was my family's. I looked up at him. He nodded. They've reached out to several investors. They're desperate. I closed the folder. Give me a week. I left his office and sat in my car for a long time. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward without realizing it. I could buy them. I could own everything they tried to keep from me. I spent the next 3 days reviewing the terms. I walked through my office late at night thinking. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was just clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about building something stable. Something right. I called Mr. Langston. I'm in. Good. I'll arrange the meeting. One condition. What's that? I restructure the company my way. No interference. Agreed. The meeting was set for the following week. I prepared like I'd never prepared before. I reviewed financials, employee records, client histories. I knew that company better than anyone, because I'd built half of it. The night before the meeting, Marcus asked me, "Are you sure about this?" I looked at him. "Yeah, I am. It's your family." "I know, but they stopped treating me like family a long time ago." He nodded. I went home, got a full night's sleep, and woke up ready. This was it. The board meeting happened in the same conference room where I used to take notes in the back. This time, I walked in with Mr. Langston beside me. The board members were already seated. My uncle, my father, Tyler, 3 outside board members I recognized. They looked tired, stressed. When I walked in, the room went silent. Tyler's face went pale. My father stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. My uncle's jaw tightened. Mr. Langston sat down. I sat beside him. One of the outside board members cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. We've reviewed your acquisition offer." I nodded. "And we're prepared to accept." My uncle slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane. She's my niece." The board member looked at him. "She's also the only offer we have." My father finally spoke. "Alyssa, you don't have to do this." I looked at him. "Yes, I do." Tyler stood up. "This is bullshit." I didn't respond. The board took a vote. 4-2. The company was mine. Tyler stormed out. My uncle followed. My father stayed. He just sat there, staring at the table. I stood up, shook hands with the board, and left. I spent the next month restructuring. I brought in a management consultant. I reviewed every department, every role, every process. I fired the people who'd been coasting. I promoted the people who'd been carrying the weight. I updated systems. I renegotiated supplier contracts. I rebuilt the culture from the ground up. My uncle was asked to step down. He refused. The board removed him. Tyler quit before I could fire him. My father stayed on in a reduced role. He didn't fight it. He just accepted it. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I just worked. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about building something sustainable. Something respectful. Something better. Clients noticed. Employees noticed. Within 2 months, the company stabilized. Within 4 months, it was profitable again. I merged it with my original company, creating a new brand. Stronger, smarter, more ethical. And I was in charge. Finally, 3 months after the acquisition, my father asked to meet privately. We sat in his old office. It felt strange being back there. "Alyssa, I need to say something." I waited. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "For what?" "For not seeing you. For not valuing you." I nodded slowly. "Okay. Is that it? What do you want me to say, Dad? I don't know. That you forgive me. I thought about that. I'm not angry anymore. But forgiveness takes time. He nodded. I understand. I hope you learn from this. He looked down. I already have. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat there for a moment. Then I stood up. I have a meeting. He nodded. I left. That was the last real conversation we had. He stayed on for another year, then retired. We stayed polite, but we were never close again. And I was okay with that. Tyler struggled after leaving. He tried to start his own company. It failed within 6 months. He blamed me, told people I sabotaged him. Nobody believed him. My uncle tried to sue me. The case was thrown out. He'd signed the acquisition agreement. There was nothing to fight. Eventually, he moved to another state. I heard he worked for a small firm. I didn't keep track. Their downfall wasn't my doing. It was theirs. They'd been arrogant, lazy, dismissive, and when the industry changed, they couldn't adapt. I didn't need to destroy them. They destroyed themselves. Meanwhile, my company grew. We expanded into 2 new regions. We signed national accounts. We built a reputation for integrity and quality. Everything they'd failed to do, I did. And I did it better. 2 years after the acquisition, I was invited to speak at an industry conference. I stood on that stage in front of 500 people and talked about leadership, about resilience, about building something from nothing. Afterward, a young woman approached me. Ms. Alyssa, thank you. That was exactly what I needed to hear. What's your situation? I work for a family business. They don't see me. I smiled. Then build something they can't ignore. She nodded, eyes bright. That night, I received an award, Industry Leader of the Year. I stood on that stage, holding the plaque, and looked out at the crowd. My team was there. Marcus. My employees. People who believed in me. My family wasn't. And that was fine. Because I'd built something bigger than them. I'd built something that mattered. And I'd done it on my own terms. A few months later, I visited the old office alone. The one where I used to sit in the back of meetings, invisible. I walked into the boardroom. Stood at the head of the table. The same table where my uncle had pushed my proposal away. Where my father had told me I wasn't leadership material. Where Tyler had smirked. I looked around the empty room. And I smiled. Not because I'd beaten them, but because I'd finally seen my own worth. They'd left me out of the family business. And at first it broke me. But then it freed me. Because when they pushed me out, I learned to build. I learned to lead. I learned to trust myself. And eventually, I built something strong enough to buy everything they tried to keep from me. I turned off the lights and walked out. I didn't need to come back. I'd already proven everything I needed to prove. To them. And more importantly, to myself. Know your worth. Build quietly. And let your success be the final word.